Tonight, last-minute reprieve. Trudeau and Trump talk on the phone as the threat of terrorists looms. Taken into custody, the notorious gangsters arrested in Fort Nelson. And by-election, voters in Tumbler Ridge are going to the polls. Good evening and thank you for joining us. And we begin tonight with just hours to go. Massive tariffs on Canadian goods have been delayed for at least 30 days. Donald Trump was busy working the phones today, talking to the leaders of Canada and Mexico. By mid-morning, the U.S. president toned down the incendiary rhetoric and gave Mexico a reprieve, a one-month extension on imposing those 25% tariffs after President Sheinbaum agreed to put thousands of troops on the border. Canada had to wait a bit longer to ward off, at least for now, Tuesday's tariff deadline. Mike Couture has our top story.
Tariffs are very powerful, both economically and in getting everything else you want.
The threat of those tariffs may have helped Trump get a deal with Mexico.
Tuvimos una conversación con el presidente Trump.
President Claudia Sheinbaum said the 25% tariffs are on hold after she promised to send 10,000 National Guard troops to her northern border to prevent the flow of fentanyl.
I have spoken to the General Secretary, who say that we should immediately get to work on this agreement.
As Mexico works on their solution, some Canadian politicians suggested following our North American neighbors.
Immediately deploy military troops, helicopters, and surveillance to the border to spot and intercept risks.
The Liberal government did announce a $1.3 billion plan to bolster security at the border, but Trump's grievances have grown beyond that.
Like, banks aren't allowed to do business in Canada. Canada is very tough. Canada is very, we're not treated well by Canada, and we have to be treated well.
In fact, U.S. banks do operate in this country. So with shifting messages from the president, Canada is focusing on retaliation. On the campaign trail, Doug Ford announced Ontario would rip up its $100 million contract with Elon Musk's Starlink.
Ontario won't do business with people hell-bent on destroying our economy.
The federal government is considering going one step further, saying procurement contracts could also prioritize Canadian firms.
A good share of them, about $250 million of contracts, or contracts to American companies, for which we are seriously considering the idea of applying a Canada First policy.
Mike Couture, CTV News, Ottawa.
Meanwhile, BC Premier David Eby says he's met with leaders of major mining and refining companies. They're now looking to redirect critical minerals and energy products to other countries if Trump enacts the tariffs next month. Eby also pulling products off the shelves like bourbon from red states at government-owned liquor stores. MLA Larry Neufeld in the BC Conservatives saying it simply isn't enough.
The lengthy amount of time, the ridiculous amount of time that it's taking to get permits for oil and gas projects, for mining, for forestry is more than significant. It's crushing to many industries.
Neufeld says the delays could lead to investment leaving the province. The opposition asking the legislature to be resumed immediately to implement a 10-year extension of existing liquid natural gas projects. The BC Conservatives outlining a 10-step plan that would also negotiate a Canada-wide free trade agreement. Neufeld says interprovincial barriers account for about 27% of the cost of doing business, and eliminating those barriers could help offset the tariffs imposed by Trump, who adds they will push to develop new markets across Canada to help lessen the reliance on the United States. And before the temporary deal, President Trump also included a lower tariff of 10% on energy. Energy made up nearly a third of Canada's exports to the United States last year. Americans buying 4.3 million barrels of crude oil every day. Economists believe that a 10% tariff will mean an increase of $6 per barrel, and gas prices could jump 20 to 25 cents per gallon in the United States.
And as long as demand stays about the same, then those refiners require our oil, especially in the Midwest, and they won't have a way to avoid it, so they're going to have to pay the tariff.
Meanwhile, Ottawa says energy is still a possible retaliatory tool if the tariffs do go through. However, the Prime Minister did not specifically say withholding oil or electricity is an option. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith continues to strenuously oppose banning or taxing energy exports. And the market's reacting unkindly to the news of Trump's sweeping tariffs today. The Canadian dollar fell to its lowest level against the US dollar in more than 2 decades. It's trending at just above 68 cents US. US markets were also down. The S&P 500 was down at 1.7%, but they rebounded slightly after news broke about Trump's phone calls with the Mexican president and Justin Trudeau. And Canadians are clearly not happy with Donald Trump's tariffs, and they're starting to show it. In Vancouver last night, Canucks fans joined the growing trend of booing the American national anthem at pro sporting events. But as soon as the singer finished the U.S. anthem, the crowd made sure to show her appreciation with claps and cheers. Everyone then joined in loudly to sing "O Canada." And it's not just happening in Vancouver. Fans in Ottawa jeered the U.S. anthem at the Senators game Saturday night. Well, in other news tonight, one of BC's most notorious gangsters has been arrested in Fort Nelson. CJDC-TV News has learned Jared Bacon was picked up by police after a shooting that sent one person to hospital. On Friday, we reported that a man was shot in the parking lot of the Knickknack building on Wednesday night. He was rushed to hospital to be treated for his injuries. A large police presence was then seen at the hospital the next day. RCMP says a 41-year-old man was arrested on Friday following a traffic stop. A second 41-year-old man was arrested later that evening. Sources say Bacon was one of the 2 people taken into custody. Bacon has been charged with aggravated assault in connection with the shooting. John Chass is facing 1 count of assault. Now, back in October, CJDC-TV broke the news Bacon, who was once a member of the Red Scorpions and the Bacon Brothers gang, was living in Fort Nelson. In 2012, the 41-year-old was sentenced to 14 years in prison after attempting to import 100 kilograms of cocaine. The Parole Board of Canada did note there were several additional charges for violent offenses that were dropped. Those included armed assault, attempted murder, assaulting causing bodily harm, and discharging a firearm with intent. Now, Bacon's been released from prison a number of times. His oldest brother, Jonathan, was shot to death in a brazen daylight shooting in Kelowna back in 2011. Bacon's other brother, Jamie, pled guilty to conspiracy in the Surrey 6 massacre, where 4 gangsters were gunned down in 2007, along with 2 innocent bystanders. Now, Fort Nelson police say today Wednesday's shooting was targeted. Bacon is expected to appear in a Williams Lake court tomorrow. However, a publication ban has been put in place. Well, it was a snow day for many students across the Peace region today. The extreme cold prompting a flurry of bus cancellations this morning. In Peace River South, school buses in both Dawson Creek and Chetwynd were not running, while in School District 60, a number of routes north of Fort St. John were also canceled. Those include Altona, Buick, Clearview, Doig River, Presbyteau, Rose Prairie, Upper Pine, and Wanawan. However, schools did remain open. School District 60 says they're taking the cold snap 1 day at a time, unsure if cancellations will continue in tomorrow. Now, parents are being asked to monitor their websites, social media channels, or subscribe to text alerts for updates. Environment Canada warning wind chill values could hit minus 44 overnight into Tuesday morning across the Peace region. Drive BC is also urging caution on the roads with slippery conditions along Highway 97. Motorists are being asked to take extra precaution and drive according to the conditions. The District of Tumbler Ridge announcing the resignation of one of its 6 council members. Ken Kilcatch submitted his resignation back on January the 20th. The district appointing both a deputy and a chief electoral officer for a by-election slated to be held in the coming months. While an official date is yet to be announced, the Local Government Act requires a by-election to be held within 80 days. Kilcatch, who turned 67 this year, took the oath of office in November of 2022. An 18-year resident of the community, he was previously employed by the district as the building services manager. And the U.S. tariffs are front and center in the Liberal leadership race. Some experts suggesting they could help the party gain support. They say that's because Canadians are more worried about the Trump administration than the carbon tax. As Colton Prail reports, that's a claim the Conservatives are denying.
We don't need what they have.
A simple message that's upended the political landscape. For weeks, Donald Trump's tariff threat has dominated headlines and become a central issue in the Liberal leadership race.
Donald Trump doesn't like me very much.
I'm ready to stand up for Canada.
The ultimate poll is Election Day.
Liberal strategists say it's reframing what the context will be for the next election.
And they're thinking about their own jobs, their own pocketbooks, but it's certainly not the carbon tax anymore. It's going to be these existential impacts.
But after spending months calling for a carbon tax election,
My common sense plan will axe the tax for everyone forever.
Conservatives disagree.
The assertion that people are abandoning the number one issue that is affecting them every single day, which is the carbon tax, is frankly preposterous.
Recent polls have shown signs of life for the Liberals. The latest Nanos findings report a 3% jump for the party, even with a new leader yet to be selected. But right now, the Conservatives still sit firmly in majority territory.
And what we're seeing is switching between the Conservatives and the Liberals, which changes the game very quickly.
All this as top Liberal leadership candidates are stepping back from a consumer carbon tax.
The Liberals haven't gone anywhere. What were the pros and cons of anything that we've done? And how do we right the ship again?
Conservatives argue when it comes to popular support, money talks. New financial filings show last year the Conservatives fundraised nearly $42 million, about double that of the NDP and Liberals combined. Colton Prail, CTV News, Ottawa.
Back to Washington, D.C. now, where current and former U.S. officials say government inspection teams reporting to Trump ally Elon Musk have been involved in standoffs with departments and agencies over access to their systems. Musk is in charge of what's being titled the Department of Government Efficiency. Sources tell the Associated Press. Staff with the department requested access to classified information from the U.S. Agency for International Development. The two top security officials there denied that access, saying Musk's team did not have proper security clearance. Well, now those officials have been put on leave, and Musk's team has been given the requested information. Staffers were told to stay out of the agency's Washington headquarters today after Musk said Donald Trump agreed with him to shut it down. USA is the world's largest single donor. In 2023, it sent out $72 billion in assistance worldwide. Trump has ordered a global freeze on most U.S. foreign aid. And U.S. officials say they've recovered and identified 55 of the 67 people killed in last week's plane crash in Washington, D.C.
We will absolutely stay here and search until such point as we have everybody.
The bodies of 12 victims are still missing. Officials say they're committed to the dignified recovery of remains as they started to lift wreckage from the Potomac River this morning. Yesterday, families of the victims visited the crash site just outside of Washington. The families gathered along the banks of the river near Reagan National Airport. Well, the Grammy Awards have been handed out in Los Angeles, and one of the bigger moments of the night was Beyoncé winning Album of the Year.
It's been many, many years.
Beyoncé won for her country album, Cowboy Carter. The win comes 25 years after her first Grammy nomination when she was part of Destiny's Child. Kendrick Lamar was won Song of the Year and Record of the Year for Not Like Us. That's one of the diss tracks he released about Drake that sparked a lawsuit. And Chappell Roan was crowned Best New Artist. All right, stay tuned. I'll be right back with a look at the weather. But as we head to break, here's a look at today's closing market numbers.